Hello, everyone. I'm excited to welcome Tom Applegarth to the IJK Podcast today. Tom is a seasoned human resources leader with over 30 years of experience, having worked with prominent companies like Goodyear Tires, Payless ShoeSource, Amoco, Belden, Potter Electric, and Young Living. His expertise spans across the United States, Europe, Asia, and Latin America, making him a truly global HR professional. Throughout his career, Tom has driven measurable improvements in employee engagement, reduced attrition rates, and helped recruit top-tier talent. He's also been instrumental in establishing high-impact HR processes that foster organizational growth and success. Currently, Tom is head of HR services at Preferred CFO, a firm that provides comprehensive finance, accounting, HR, and payroll support to small businesses. Today, Tom will share his insights on the future of HR, exploring how organizations, employees, and HR professionals can navigate the shift towards hybrid work models and the AI revolution. Tom, welcome to the IJK Podcast.
It's good to be here.
Thank you very much for being with us today. Tom, to start off, could you share how remote and hybrid work models have evolved since the pandemic? What are some of the key challenges that companies are facing with these new ways of working?
So certainly the pandemic made working remotely much more prevalent than it was prior to the pandemic. And now I think there's a trend where a lot of companies are looking to get employees back into the office more and more. I have yet to meet a CEO who isn't trying to make that happen, where they feel a need to have more and more employees in the office. And most employees don't want to go back into the office, especially full time. So there seems to be this dance and this balance that is trying to be created, the new norm, and it seems like a lot of companies are kind of settling in at 2 or 3 days in the office and 2 or 3 days not in the office, with the senior leadership team or certainly the CEO trying to push for more days in the office and employees pushing back and not wanting to come into the office as much. So I think we're in this phase where there's a little bit of push on each side.
All right. And Tom, what strategies have you seen that help organizations maintain their culture and employee engagement in a remote or hybrid environment? Do you see like any threat to a company's culture when people work remotely, or companies have been successful in navigating this challenge as well?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of companies that have been successful in navigating that challenge, and I think one of the big keys is really identifying what are we trying to accomplish as a company, what is each department trying to accomplish, and what is each individual trying to accomplish, and really identifying key metrics to review on a weekly and monthly basis to really continue to drive not only the results, but I think those metrics really help define the culture as well, and what is important and equally what is not important. And I think those companies that are more successful at really identifying the key metrics and driving that, I think are the ones that are able to maintain their culture even though they may not be in the same location.
Mm-hmm. I see. Of course, hybrid working models and remote working specifically has its pros and cons. Some of the pros maybe could be flexibility, right? But
Sure.
What do you see are the major disadvantages of actually working remotely, especially from an employer's perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's much harder for people to develop relationships when they're remote from one another. And so I think you do lose a little bit of that fabric that's created when people have interactions in person, are able to go out to lunch, to go out for drinks after work, to have that water cooler talk. I mean, I do think that you lose some of that personal touch when it is fully remote, which is why I think a lot of companies, the balance of having people come into the office a couple days a week, is maybe that middle ground between making certain that there's enough time together in person to develop those relationships a little deeper than you ever could in a totally remote environment.
Hmm. Do we see a negative impact on productivity?
It really depends on who you talk to, and I think it depends a lot on the jobs. Initially there were a lot of studies done during the pandemic, and in professional office type jobs, there really wasn't much negative impact on productivity. I mean, I think longer term there might be some impact. So it's really mixed. I don't think that anybody can say across the board that it is either no impact or a negative impact of productivity. I think that's still to be seen, and a lot of the studies are going either way. So I don't think there's a definitive conclusion on that.
Okay. Are there like certain maybe strategies or guardrails, sorry, that companies can put in place to actually make sure that productivity isn't affected? I don't know. Is there such a thing, or there wasn't like a concerted effort to look into that specifically when they moved, when employee moved to work remotely?
No, I mean, I think that as much as you can define and as good as you can refine the metrics that each person is responsible for, that roll into the metrics for their department, their business unit, and ultimately the company, the better you're able to manage that productivity, and make sure that there isn't a slide in productivity. And a lot of the companies that I've worked with, certain people don't have an environment at home that would allow them to be productive. And so when that happens, one of the things that I often talk to companies about doing is, if somebody's not being productive, one of the first things you ought to do is say, you're just not being productive in the current environment. Let's have you come into the office where you maybe aren't going to have the same kind of distractions that you may have at home, and see if you can be productive. And if you can't be productive in the office, then maybe we have to look at parting company. But there's certain people that aren't going to be able to be productive at home. And on the flip side, there's other people who maybe are more productive at home. I do think one of the things that we saw with totally remote work, and are still seeing to some extent with the hybrid model, is that people tend to work longer, because they don't, if they're not just doing work while they're in the office, and have a little more flexibility. A lot of times the number of hours that they're working increase, which is certainly can be an increase in productivity as well.
Yeah, that's definitely a surprising, unexpected effect, I guess, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and depending on the situation, but some people that have really long commutes, well, if they're forced to go into the office, they may be much quicker to get out of there right after, an 8 or 9 hour day than if they have an hour commute on each side, then they're going to be when they're at home and they don't have that commute, and they have a lot more flexibility in when to do their work.
Right, right. Tom, do you think hybrid work is here to stay, or we will see a shift back to more traditional work models in the future?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we'll always have more hybrid work going forward than we did before the pandemic. So
Okay.
before the pandemic, I think hybrid work was
Frowned
not
upon.
very common. It depends on the company and depends on the situation. After, I think it really depends on the company. But so I think there will always be more hybrid work now than there was prior to the pandemic. but probably not as much remote work as was happening in 2020 and 2021. So I think companies will find that balance. I think that a lot of CEOs that are in their 40s, 50s, and older have a hard time changing their mindset. I think that as more and more people grow up in this hybrid model, and as the CEOs of companies become people that were born in the 90s and later, I think hybrid will kind of reach that equilibrium. So like almost most things in life, I think there's a pendulum, and I think it continues to swing. But I think that hybrid, will continue to be more than it ever was before the pandemic, because I think people have seen the pros of hybrid, where before it was an unknown that really wasn't very prevalent.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, contrast this with, for example, recent announcement from Amazon, for example, that recently stated everybody should be back to the office. For example, here in Canada, 5 days a week. How does this work in reality? Is this practical, or will this eventually lead to some employees leaving or simply parting ways with some companies that are enforcing 5 days a week return to the office?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see how Amazon's and other companies have done it as well. But Amazon's probably the most recent and the most and the most prevalent one doing that. But I would imagine they are going to have some attrition. There are going to be some people that end up leaving. And certainly, anytime a company is out there recruiting, if it's a fully remote job, their ability to attract candidates and their candidate pool is much larger than it is if it's a hybrid model. And then if it's 5 days in the office, it's even more restrictive for sure. And so I am sure that Amazon is going to have some attrition. They're a big enough company and successful enough that I think if the leadership decides that nope, we are not going to change this. It is going to be 5 days in the office for the majority of the jobs. I am sure they can pull it off. They have enough brand recognition, and there's enough people, that will be willing to do that. That if that's something that they really want to do and that they think is beneficial to their company, I think they'll be able to pull it off. Some smaller employers and may not be as successful at being able to pull that off. So I think it depends a lot on the situation. And I always encourage CEOs to really kind of take a step back and really understand why you want to do it. And what are the metrics that are telling you that your business is going to be more successful when you do that, as opposed to, whatever your current situation is. And there's, companies that are less successful financially may have a bigger, uh, may be willing to take a bigger risk in saying, well, hey, do we think that is because we are more remote than and maybe not as hybrid, or maybe not fully in the office? And companies that are struggling financially, looking for what is the solution to increase productivity, may be willing to take a bigger risk than others. Amazon's definitely not in that camp. I think it's just the CEO and the senior leadership team feel like that will benefit their business. Um, we will see. They will definitely have some attrition and be recruiting in a different kind of pool of candidates than companies that are more flexible in whether or not people come back to the office and how frequently they come back to the office.
Yeah, for sure. Do you think, Tom, the fact of owning, for example, large offices has to do or influences the decision to bring back the employees? Because if you have a large chunk of real estate that you're renting and you're paying a high rent every year, yet it's half utilized, then that's one of the reasons why you want as well to make sure that you're taking advantage of your company assets. I don't know how, I mean, how the real estate factor as well has influenced this aspect, this remote versus non-remote work aspect? Do you have any insights on that?
Well, it's definitely, I think, human reaction. I've heard more than one CEO, kind of make that comment, and so I think it is a natural human reaction to look at a lot of real estate and say, wow, we're underutilizing this real estate. Maybe we should force everybody back in the office. I think that's one of the worst reasons to bring people back into the office. I mean, it is a fixed cost, and there's a lot of companies that have saved a lot of money. Now, usually when you have a lease, it's could be a year or two or even 5 years out from when you have an opportunity to decrease that cost.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of companies that have saved a lot of money in the last 4 years because they have decreased their real estate footprint and either and not renewed some of those leases or even sold buildings, and so there is cost savings to be had, and before companies really lock that in and say no. I don't want to reduce that retail footprint. I really think they have to really try and understand and look at metrics to understand whether or not that's a wise financial decision. I don't think that companies are that any companies are going to go to zero real estate and be fully remote if they haven't been that before, but they should all look at, hey, are we really, because you can have a building, and if you only have people come into the office 2 days a week, you can have less than half the real estate that you did before and still have people coming in, and very even though Amazon was one company that's going the opposite direction, Cisco is a very large company that's embracing the fully remote, has shed a lot of real estate over the last 4 years, and I don't think that they will ever kind of swing the pendulum back, because their CEO and their senior leadership has fully embraced going remote, and they are saving a lot of money because of all the real estate that they have shed over the last 4 years.
Absolutely. Do you think the decision is only within the let's say the power of the companies? In other words, and I don't want to play here conspiracy theorist. However, when people commute to the office, they spend on gas. They maybe like the economy is probably boosted. You have higher rents that you're paying for a larger real estate. Do you think governments have played or may play a role in inciting companies, encouraging them to bring back employees to the office, or that's too much implication or too much power for external factors?
Yeah, well, for sure, you look at a lot of cities like New York City, like San Francisco, that enjoyed, prior to the pandemic, had a lot of commuters, where the populations of those cities would increase dramatically during the workday. And I must imagine that, if you're a mayor of one of those cities, you really want to figure out how to get people coming back into the office. I haven't seen any real overt ways that they're doing that. I haven't seen a lot of tax incentives. I haven't seen a lot of pressure, come to play to CEOs or others to try and really bring people back into those cities. But I have to imagine that the mayors of those cities and their staffs are trying to figure out how to do that, because there's a huge economic benefit to the city if they can bring those commuters back the way it was prior to the pandemic. And so I'm sure there may be things that I haven't seen that those cities are doing, but they have to be thinking about that, because they've definitely taken a financial hit.
Yeah, for sure. So it could be an indirect maybe influence, but not an overt one, as you just mentioned.
Yeah, I haven't seen it. There might be some that I'm not familiar with, but I haven't seen it be real overt. But I am sure that there's conversations happening and strategies being put in place by those cities because of the financial hit they've taken since the pandemic.
For sure, for sure. Tom, I'd like to shift gears now and understand and talk about the AI revolution and its implication on the HR function. So help me understand, what is the impact of AI on the HR function and how is it disrupting or transforming HR practices today?
So AI has probably played the biggest impact in recruiting. The tools that are available now, where companies can find candidates using AI and screen candidates using AI, is just greatly enhanced. Where for not a huge expense, companies are able to hire HR professionals who can utilize those AI recruiting tools and find candidates that, you know, years ago they would have to, if they wanted that level of specificity in the candidates they are looking at, the only way to do it 10 years ago was to hire a recruiting firm to really go and spend, hundreds of hours screening candidates and reaching out to passive candidates and finding people. That's not the case today. Today, there are many different AI tools that companies can use where you can find candidates with very, very specific skill sets relatively quickly and reach out to them where, you can have AI who are sending out, thousands and thousands of emails and, other ways of contacting candidates to find those passive candidates that aren't even looking for a job, but get an email, you know, open it and start asking questions and want to talk to somebody because of an opening that they find through email or text or some other type of communication.
I see. And when you refer to AI's influence on recruitment and then finding those candidates, are you saying like now there's a new trend whereby companies are actively reaching out to potential candidates that didn't necessarily apply to the job or are not even thinking maybe of applying somewhere? That's what you're saying.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so when any company has an opening, um, they often go post it on the job post boards initially. And then there's AI software that will help you screen those candidates and if and especially, I mean, small companies usually don't have this problem, but very big companies like Amazon or Cisco or companies that people know, when they post a job, they may get thousands and thousands and thousands of applications, and then they'll use AI software to help them narrow that down. But even and the more specific the skill set or the higher the level in the organization, they may very well not find somebody in, even though they're getting thousands of applicants, they may not find somebody who has the specific skill set and experience that they're looking for. And so companies have always done this for the last, 30 plus years, but usually they were using a recruiting firm who would then reach out to passive candidates, people who aren't even looking for a job, and talk to them about an opening and try and sell them on
Like headhunters, for
like
example.
headhunters, for example.
Okay.
Absolutely. And now the headhunting business has become a lot more competitive, and AI is a direct competitor because AI can reach out to thousands of candidates that are passive and see if they can entice them. Now, there's always going to be a role for the headhunter because you know there's still going to be a lot of passive candidates who don't open the email, don't respond to the email or whatever. And so a headhunter, is still, there's still going to be a need for, if a company can't fill the job posting it, they can't fill it with AI, reaching out to passive candidates. Well, then now they're going to have to, use the recruiter. And certainly for, really senior level jobs, that you're probably still going to end up using a recruiter and may just start there because you don't have any faith that you're going to be able to hire a VP or a CEO or whatever through posting it, or even have an AI reach out to them. But the days, 20 years ago, when one of the big value propositions of headhunters were their database. Well, that's less of a competitive advantage for recruiting firms than it was. That I mean, now it's much less of a recruiting advantage because AI and LinkedIn. I mean, almost all professionals are on LinkedIn today. You can use LinkedIn's AI and search ability, but there's also a lot of other AI that have scraped LinkedIn and other profiles from everywhere and can really reach out to these candidates in a very automated way.
Wow. Okay. So you see like clearly a big advantage here for employers, right? Leveraging AI technology to reach out to those passive candidates. But
Yep.
are there also some pitfalls here? Like what may be disadvantages by solely relying on AI, or maybe relying too much on that technology to complete or to fulfill your recruitment needs?
Yeah, yeah, I think definitely the U.S. government in specific, and maybe other governments around the world, but the U.S. government in specific, and the EEOC, which is the regulatory agency that really uh, is there to enforce the U.S. laws against discrimination, have definitely told companies that you can't just rely on your software.
Hmm.
If your software is discriminating based on race, sex, age,
And
gender,
it could happen.
whatever,
It could. I mean, bias could happen and could
absolutely,
occur within the software.
absolutely. And so companies need to be very careful about, totally relying on that and not having any kind of oversight. And so they need to test their software. Obviously, software vendors need to test their software, but companies, we haven't seen a lot of it yet, but we've seen some. And I think that potentially, if the software is is proven to be discriminatory, could end up costing some companies a lot of money in lawsuits if they're not really careful about making sure that the software and their processes, not just relying on software, but all of the other processes that they're using in their recruiting process to make sure that it isn't discriminatory is definitely a potential downside.
Yeah, so it's the case with any AI application and use cases as well. There, I mean, it seems to me that there should always be that human aspect that controls the AI
For
underlying
sure.
technology. Otherwise, you end up in those now classic scenarios whereby you're unfair or you're biased in your
Yep.
decisions. So, and it looks like it applies here as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, you need to manage the AI, and you need to audit the AI, and you need to make sure that as a company, and then that's why you need to rely on really good vendors as well. But the company can't, needs to make sure that they're managing it and auditing it, and that they're comfortable and can prove that whatever process they're using is not discriminatory. And of course, there is a good side to it. There's a lot of these software packages will allow companies to enhance their ability to recruit diversity. And so, one of the best defenses is to be increasing, because almost all companies, still have underrepresentation in, certain groups, whether it be gender, whether it be race, whatever. And one of the best defenses is companies that are actively managing that and increasing their representation in those groups. And so, AI can be used for that, and a lot of these software will allow you to really focus in on, hey, I really want to hire more diversity, and how do I do that? And please help me find the candidates, so that we can give them extra consideration as we're trying to increase the diversity of our company.
Okay, I see. AI, sorry, Tom, aside of the application of AI to recruitment, do you see AI playing a major or significant role in the other aspects of HR, for example, performance management or career development, like these different bits and pieces in the HR function?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that there is a lot of companies who are starting to use AI in putting together development plans, putting together performance management systems, and helping them in those regards. I think there's probably a lot more intuitive need to have the human involved in, double checking. And so I think companies are slower to adopt AI in those areas, but there's definitely a lot of companies that are looking at that, and AI can really help enhance a lot of the different aspects of HR. I mean, we use it all the time in putting together job descriptions and but it's always first drafts and putting together job descriptions and putting together communication that's going to go out to employees, but it's not to a point where you can just, you know, not have anybody review it before you end up implementing it. There's still a lot of blips in most of that software, but it is a great first tool as you're putting together, those types of human resources processes.
Yeah, for sure. And if we talk about AI as a disruptor in terms of uh, industries, we've heard, for example, some rumors or some fears claiming that AI might reduce the need of using developers, for example, like IT developers within big tech. Let's take that as an example. Do you see AI destroying certain jobs and careers or certain let's call them sectors, or on the contrary, you see that as an opportunity to develop new skills and then maybe transform certain careers into something else?
Yeah, we have seen it throughout time that uh, technology has totally eliminated the need for jobs, right? I mean, imagine whomever it was that were making horse saddles, 150 years ago.
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot fewer of people making horse saddles now than there was 150 years ago. But and I am sure AI is going to eliminate the need of some jobs, or at least some aspects of some jobs. And so it will absolutely decrease the need for some jobs. But I think just what's been happening over the last, 150 years will continue to happen, where employees that are being negatively impacted need to develop other skills. And I think that AI is just going to help the jobs that they eliminate will, if for people that are continuous learners and continually increase their skill set, they're going to be more productive. There's always a population. I'm sure there was a population of people who were making horse saddles that couldn't adapt and couldn't figure out what else to do, and it will be a very negative impact on them. But that's why I always encourage everybody to be continuous learners and figure out, how can I use the new technology to make me more effective, more efficient, and a bigger asset in the global economy. But it'll be a disruptor for sure. But there's been disruptors for the last 150 to 200 years, and I think that people that learn how to adapt to that actually benefit from the disruption. People that aren't able to learn new skills and abilities and are can't figure out how to become an effective participant in the economy, even though what they used to do is now being done by AI largely, will suffer. And I think that's been happening for the last 150 to 200 years.
Yeah, yeah, for sure, for sure. Uh, and if we think of the HR profession itself, do you think HR professionals should focus on certain specific skills going forward to, especially within the context of this AI disruption and, as well, this increasing digitization of human resources? Do you see, like, within this profession in particular, are there certain key skills that you believe are crucial for success in the future?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing that every HR professional ought to do is embrace AI and figure out how it will help you do your job and the job of the entire HR function more effectively and efficiently. And then the part of, I mean, the human interaction, um, coaching and counseling, managers and employees, that maybe AI will replace that at some point in time, but
Really?
it's going to be much longer in the future. Who knows? I never say never, but I think that there's an administrative part of HR that is probably going to be easier to automate, and that AI will take over time, and that's already happened to a large degree. I mean, there's a lot of automation that's happened that I've seen in my career over the last 30 years. Things that were being done, much more manually and much more on spreadsheets that are now being done on software that's been developed, and AI, has replaced a lot of manual work and sorting through resumes and reaching out to people and scheduling, and the same thing in kind of the benefits space and the payroll space. A lot of that's become much more automated than it was 30 years ago, and I think that will just continue. But I think that the HR professionals that have embraced technology are more successful over the last 30 years, and will continue to be more successful. They just need to understand how to use that as a tool, and how to use that tool to help them be more effective in managing the HR function going forward.
Yes, absolutely. Now, for sure, the administrative aspect and whatever can be automated will probably, as you said, be uh, slowly but surely replaced by AI. However, in the HR function, unlike maybe other functions, has this I don't know if it's the right word, but this emotional aspect as well linked to it, like this human component that is a bit different than what you see in the finance function or the marketing function even. So that emotional aspect is going to be much tougher to replace, correct?
I agree with that. Yeah, and I'm not sure they'll ever be able to replace it with AI. But I never say never, and always continually amazed at what is able to be automated. And so I never think that I can totally predict what there might be a space that could never be automated. I'm not sure that I could ever fully predict that. And so I think that everybody just needs to embrace the technology and really understand it, use it, figure out what it's good at and what it's not good at, and then continually test those boundaries. I think it's human nature to kind of rely on what and think that that's not going to change. But for sure, change is inevitable. It's been a transition, of the entire world, since the dawning of time, and I think change will continue to happen. And people that embrace that change, understand it, and then are critical about what it's good at and what it's not good at, are those that will really be successful.
Yes, for sure. Now, looking ahead, what other trends do you see reshaping the HR function in the future, aside of AI and this new hybrid working models? Are there certain trends that are also emerging within the function?
Well, I think that especially in the U.S., the long-term trend of having a talent shortage, I think, is inevitable. The birth rate continues to go down, and so the only and really the only growth that has happened in the last, probably 5 or 10 years in the U.S. workforce is through immigration. And the political the inability of our federal government to really solve and look at in an intelligent way how to grow our workforce through immigration has been a real issue. And so I'm hopeful that at some point in time, Congress and the president can have an intelligent um, process in bringing in immigration into the U.S. I think it would be great. I'm just not sure if the political dynamics, at least in the short term, are going to help us fix that problem. And so skilled talent within the U.S. is going to continue to be an issue. And so the human resources functions that can attract and retain the talent that their organizations need is going to be um, a real gauge on whether or not a company can be successful. Because I think, we've all seen how tight the labor market has been over the last 4 years. And there's obviously going to be short-term blips, where there's going to be, more or less labor available. But the long-term trend, unless the U.S. government really, fixes the immigration issue, the long-term trend, I think, is going to be tighter and tighter labor market and more war for talent as companies are trying to hire the best and the brightest and the skill sets that they need in order for them to be successful. I think that's just going to continue to get harder, not easier.
Okay. You think that there's a shortage already happening when it comes to quality, or like let's call it top qualified talent in the US specifically?
Yeah, well, I mean, so you just look at the number of applicants for H-1B visas,
Yeah.
which is usually sponsored by companies that are trying to bring that talent into the U.S. Well, they have 5, 6 times as many applicants every year for H-1B visas versus the quota that is capped by U.S. law on how many people can come in. And then a lot of companies are then, when they can't bring in that talent, through the H-1B visa, they're trying to figure out other ways to get that talent to come in. And
Uh-huh.
and so I think it's we suffer not only from just not having enough people, period, but then not having enough people with the skill sets that companies are really demanding. And so, with the birth rate going down, unless we figure out how to bring that skill set in higher proportions than what we have been, we're going to continue to have a shortage of skilled workers in the U.S.
All right. What about the trend of outsourcing? And I think you are in that business probably.
Yes, absolutely.
I've personally seen that or noticed that many companies nowadays are outsourcing entire departments, like whether it's marketing or human resources. Can you talk a little bit about that, about this trend? And
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it has been a trend for the last 10 or 20 years, and I think it continues. Um, because of the specialization of labor, it's hard for any company to be the best at every single area that they need in order to run their company. And the smaller the company, the more difficult it is. And so the niche that my company today plays is, most of our clients are really small companies, less than 100 employees, less than 15 million in revenue. So really, really small companies. And and so they almost all of them either don't have the talent that they need in finance, accounting, HR, payroll, or even sometimes marketing or IT. I mean, it's just that company can't afford full-time employees that have the level of talent that they really need. And it's not a full-time job. None of those are full-time jobs for these really small companies. And so, and so if they aren't outsourcing, they're probably either not having the skill set that they need and it's causing problems in their business that maybe they don't even know they have, or they are overpaying for it because some of these small companies do have a full-time CFO. They do have a full-time HR manager, but they probably don't need it. And not that the people in that role would ever admit to it, but they probably aren't, fully engaged, working, 40, 50, 60 hours a week to get the job done. Because, these small companies generally just don't need that kind of talent. But even bigger companies, today in the payroll sector, because of all the specialized software, even really large companies who have who have employees in many, many different states, well, to just be compliant with the law, it makes no sense for even a really large company to try and have the software and the expertise to make sure you're compliant in all the different state laws that are impacting, payroll and HR. And so even very big companies are outsourcing at least at least the software portion of it, and a lot of times even more of it, so that they don't have to try and build that expertise in house.
all right. And is it more like much more economical as well for them? So in a way, like they would get the actual skills that they need, and at the same time, they would be paying less versus hiring a full timer. This is kind of the main advantage.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I think and so specifically with the companies that I deal with, it's much cheaper for them to have a fractional CFO, controller, HR manager, and payroll manager than it is for them to hire those people full time.
I wanted to
Um,
ask, sorry to cut you, about that
sure.
term actually, fractional, that I see now
Yep.
increasingly used on LinkedIn and other job platforms. So this term fractional, let's say CFO or fractional CMO, what does it exactly mean? Like
Yep.
maybe I can guess what it means, but maybe if you can explain
Yeah.
like
Yeah,
more
it
clearly.
means, it means that, so in our business, for example, we'll have a CFO who has, 20, 30 years of experience, has worked for, small companies, big companies, has a lot of experience. And then these really tiny companies that are our clients, um, there's not 40 hours worth of work for that CFO at that small company. So they'll go and be the CFO. So they're there every day, or maybe they're not even there every day, but they're definitely reachable every day. And but they're only spending 10 or 20 hours a week with that company. But they are the CFO, and in fact, a lot of times that fractional CFO may be managing a accountant or a bookkeeper, where that company does have full-time work for an accountant or a bookkeeper. Um, if they're a little bigger in size. And so their boss is the CFO, but that CFO is working 10 or 20 hours a week at that company, 10 or 20 hours a week at another company, 10 or 20 hours a week at a third company. And so that CFO has a full-time job, but maybe is the CFO for 3 or 4 different
Got
companies.
it. And it's becoming a trend, or it has this term has existed like for the past 10 years, or is
Yeah,
it because I keep hearing it more like it's becoming more frequent recently, the
yeah,
fractional. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So my company actually was started by the founder 10 years ago. And so that fractional CFO, concept has been around for 10 or maybe even 20 years. But I think that the ease of working virtually has even increased that more. So I think it's become more and more prevalent because, maybe 10 or 20 years ago, somebody would think about all right, I need a CFO. I am in, whatever space. Maybe I'm in the IT, computer software
Pharma. Yeah.
space,
Yeah.
pharma, whatever it might be. And so I need a CFO that really understands my business. And maybe I'm in a smaller city. Maybe I'm in Cincinnati. Well, I may not be able to find a part-time CFO in Cincinnati, and I'm, that has the
Qualifications.
industry experience that
Yeah.
I'm looking for. So I'm probably overpaying. Yeah, my CFO is probably, either not fully busy or doing work that is beneath them, but they're doing it because, I need them here in person, and I can't find anybody, can't find somebody on a fractional basis in Cincinnati. Well, now and with our company, almost none of we have 80 employees, we have 100 different clients. Almost none of our employees are in the same city as our clients. They're all working over Zoom or Teams or whatever. And of course, we'll fly there, if there's a board meeting or another meeting or some other reason for people to be in person, we'll fly there. But on a day-to-day basis, the interactions are all over Zoom. And so now that person sitting in Cincinnati that maybe 20 years ago had a full-time CFO, well, now for, a fourth of the cost, they can have a full-time CFO, who's at least available to them full-time, even though they may only be working 10 or 20 hours a week. And they can get on a Zoom call anytime they want. And anytime there's a big need, they can say, no, I need you to fly in and spend this week, in Cincinnati. But they can have access to that fractional CFO much easier than they could, 10 years ago when Zoom and video conferencing was much less
Prevalent. Yeah.
prevalent and easy.
And
I
easy.
mean, I don't know about you, but 10 years ago, I wouldn't have had the ability to get on my laptop and have this conversation.
Yeah.
I worked for a very large company that had video conferencing, and they had a video conferencing room in
Yeah.
each office, and we'd have to go into that
And
room
expensive
to have.
hardware. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
so it wasn't available, at least to me 10 years ago, on my laptop like it is today.
So COVID. So you think COVID and the pandemic has definitely been the catalyst to the acceptance of that fractional C-level title now,
Yeah,
and Zoom and all
yeah,
that has also helped.
yeah, I think so because I think now, you can get access to that talent anywhere in the world, and where prior to the pandemic, that may or may not have been technically possible, but the mindset wasn't there, right? The CEO of a small company was not nearly as comfortable having a fractional CFO who's not in their same city, as they are now.
I see. I see. Tom, it's been a very exciting conversation. Before we finish off, I'd like to ask a few questions related to your current role and maybe how can people reach out to you to avail your services. So maybe if you can tell us a little bit, where can people find you online?
Yes, absolutely. So you can go to our website, preferredcfo.com, and reach out to me or reach out to anybody in my company. You can also, if you just Google Tom Applegarth Human Resources, I come up pretty high on the search because there's not a lot of people with my surname. Um, and you can reach out to me on LinkedIn, or my email address is toma@preferredcfo.com.
Perfect, perfect. Tom, any final words?
It's certainly, I mean, I think the future is very exciting. I think that all the technology that's continued to change, I think it's just going to get faster and faster. And I think that we're as companies, we're just going to become more and more efficient, more and more effective, which I think will just help everybody who is in the mindset of how do I continuously improve my company, my what I'm responsible for, and my skill
Mhm.
set are going to just have a fabulous future. Unfortunately, those that don't take that mindset may have a less fabulous future. So I encourage everybody to sharpen their saw every day and figure out how they can continuously improve.
Yeah, and as you said, upskilling and continuous learning, this is key to succeeding in these fast, changing circumstances and era, this fast evolving AI powered era.
Absolutely. Nope, I agree with you.
All right. Thank you very much, Tom. It's been a pleasure
Thank you.
to talk to you today.
Likewise.
Best of luck.
Thank you.
Take care.
You too.
Bye
Thank
bye.
you. Bye.